By September 1944, Allied forces in Western Europe believed they had reached a decisive moment in the war. Following the breakout from Normandy and the rapid advance across France and Belgium, German units appeared to be in full retreat. Supply lines were stretched, command structures disrupted, and many German formations were operating below strength. This situation created a sense of urgency among Allied leadership. The prevailing belief was that Germany could be defeated before the end of the year if Allied forces acted decisively. The question was not whether to advance, but how. Two competing strategic approaches emerged. One favored a broad front advance, maintaining pressure across the entire front line. The other favored a narrow, deep thrust into German territory, aimed at breaking the enemy's defenses in a single decisive blow. Operation Market Garden was the embodiment of the second approach. The plan was primarily championed by Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery. His objective was to bypass the heavily fortified Siegfried Line by advancing north through the Netherlands, crossing the Rhine River, and entering Germany from an unexpected direction. If successful, the operation would place Allied forces beyond Germany's last major natural defensive barrier in the west. The concept relied on speed. Airborne troops would seize key bridges deep behind enemy lines, while ground forces would rapidly advance to link up with them. The entire operation was designed around a narrow time window. Every phase depended on the successful completion of the previous one. There was little redundancy built into the plan. Operation Market Garden was divided into two components. Market referred to the airborne operation. 3 airborne divisions, the U.S. 101st Airborne, the U.S. 82nd Airborne, and the British 1st Airborne Division, reinforced by a Polish brigade, would drop into the Netherlands. Their mission was to capture and hold a series of bridges over rivers, canals, and roadways. These bridges formed a corridor stretching approximately 100 kilometers from the Belgian border to the city of Arnhem. Garden referred to the ground offensive. British XXX Corps would advance along this corridor, using a single main road to reach the Rhine and relieve the airborne units. The entire plan assumed that XXX Corps could advance rapidly and without prolonged interruption. This assumption would prove critical. The planning phase revealed early warning signs. Intelligence reports indicated that German forces in the Netherlands were not as weak as previously assumed. Reconnaissance photos and intercepted communications suggested the presence of armored units near Arnhem, including elements of experienced SS Panzer divisions. These reports were acknowledged, but their significance was minimized. German forces were assessed as disorganized remnants, incapable of coordinated resistance. Planners believed that even if armored units were present, they would be slow to respond and unable to concentrate quickly. This assessment underestimated both German adaptability and local command initiative. Another issue was logistics. Market Garden required precise timing across multiple domains: air transport, airborne deployment, ground movement, resupply, and communications. Any delay would compound rapidly. However, Allied air transport capacity was limited. There were not enough aircraft to deploy all airborne forces in a single lift. As a result, airborne landings were scheduled over multiple days. This meant that initial airborne units would have to hold their objectives longer than originally intended, often without heavy weapons or reinforcements. Despite this, the plan was not adjusted. Drop zones were another concern. To reduce exposure to German anti-aircraft fire, many airborne units were assigned drop zones several kilometers away from their objectives. This decision increased safety during landing but significantly increased the time required to reach key bridges. It also increased the risk of enemy contact before objectives were secured. Planners accepted this trade-off. Communications were also assumed to function reliably. Airborne radios had limited range and were known to be sensitive to terrain and interference. These limitations were understood but considered manageable. Backup systems were minimal. The plan assumed that units could coordinate effectively even if communications were partially disrupted. Terrain considerations were equally optimistic. The ground advance depended almost entirely on a single elevated road running through flat, low-lying terrain. This road passed through towns, bridges, and narrow choke points. If the road were blocked or cut, the advance would halt. Despite this vulnerability, No alternate routes were available for armored columns. Market Garden was, in effect, a high-risk operation with little tolerance for failure. Yet confidence remained high. Recent successes in Normandy and France reinforced the belief that German resistance was collapsing. Allied commanders believed they were pursuing a defeated enemy, not confronting one capable of rapid recovery. This mindset shaped decision-making. Market Garden was approved with the expectation that boldness would compensate for risk. Speed would overcome resistance. Momentum would replace caution. These assumptions formed the foundation of the operation. When Market Garden was launched on September 17, 1944, it did so on a plan that required near-perfect execution, accurate intelligence, and uninterrupted movement. The reality on the ground would soon challenge every one of these expectations. The airborne phase of Operation Market Garden began on September 17, 1944. Initially, the scale of the landings appeared impressive. Thousands of paratroopers descended across the Netherlands in what was, at the time, the largest airborne operation in history. However, problems emerged almost immediately. Because of limited transport aircraft, airborne deployments were spread across multiple days. This meant that only part of each division landed on the first day. Heavy weapons, vehicles, artillery, and additional troops would arrive later, if conditions allowed. This delay reduced combat power at the most critical moment. Many airborne units landed far from their objectives. Drop zones were chosen for safety rather than proximity to bridges. As a result, troops were forced to move through enemy-controlled territory before reaching their targets. German forces, initially surprised, recovered quickly in several areas. German units regrouped and organized defensive positions within hours. Roadblocks, ambushes, and armored patrols disrupted airborne movements. Small delays accumulated rapidly. Communications failures worsened the situation. Radios failed to operate reliably due to terrain, equipment limitations, and interference. Units lost contact with each other and with higher command. In some cases, commanders had no clear picture of where their own troops were located. This breakdown in communication prevented coordinated action. At Arnhem, these problems became decisive. The British 1st Airborne Division was responsible for securing the final bridge over the lower Rhine. This bridge was the most critical objective of the entire operation. Only one battalion reached the bridge. The rest of the division was delayed by German resistance, blocked routes, and confusion caused by poor communications. Attempts to reinforce the battalion at the bridge failed. German forces reacted faster than Allied planners had anticipated. Armored units, including tanks and self-propelled guns, moved into Arnhem. Infantry and artillery followed. The British paratroopers at the bridge were isolated and surrounded. Despite repeated attacks, they held their positions for several days. Ammunition and medical supplies rapidly ran out. Resupply attempts largely failed, with many drops landing in German-held areas. Casualties increased while relief forces were delayed. XXX Corps advanced along a single exposed road and was repeatedly halted by German counterattacks. Each delay reduced the chance of reaching Arnhem in time. Weather conditions limited air support and further disrupted coordination. The airborne units were never relieved. On September 25, Allied command ordered a withdrawal. Survivors crossed the Rhine under cover of darkness, leaving most wounded behind. The British 1st Airborne Division suffered catastrophic losses. The bridge was never secured. Operation Market Garden failed to achieve its objective.